Hey, Crystal, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this
It
episode.
is so awesome to have you. I just recently engaged in a workshop of yours, and then I won a one-on-one. We just did that yesterday. So feel like
Ah,
yesterday you saw my vulnerability side, and today we're more professional side. But I love, engaging with our guests in what they're doing, whether that be a product, an app, or a service. So it's really cool to see you in different aspects.
yeah, you too. I mean, yesterday was obviously really beautiful, and I loved having you in the workshop. You just brought so much beautiful electric energy. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be in that electric energy today too and
Let's
talk
do
about
it. Let's
sex. Love talking about
continue the electricity. Well, first,
that.
let's tell our listeners who you are. Tell us more about your background.
Okay. So I'm Crystal Rose Napolitano. I'm a somatic sexologist, and I've been coaching in sexology or somatics primarily in my own practice since formally 2021. It's something I kind of fell into during the pandemic. I did not plan for a career in working in this field or in sexology at all. I started out in international relations. That's what my master's is in, and worked in like foreign exchange programs for the first part of my career. And then COVID changed all of us in one way or another. Um, and I lived in New York City for 8 years, built my practice during a pandemic. And I say being an entrepreneur is hard, but being an entrepreneur during a pandemic is really, really, really hard. And and it's kind of blossomed into so many different versions, as you know your projects tend to do. And now I live in southern France, and I'm excited to kind of see how my services will work here. Still seeing clients in the US, but I'm excited to breach into this market that is very different. So,
So, if you're working in political science or agriculture or, software development, there's still hope for you to be a sexologist, is what I hear.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just during COVID, I like had nothing to do and I applied to a program and they were like, at the end of this, you'll be a sex and relationship coach or a somatic sexologist. Like you can choose what title. And I did it. And it was just like, okay, this is awesome. And I can help people in a really cool way. And I get to talk about sex. And all my sex toys are tax deductible. So that's when you know you're winning at life.
I write off my manicures because I'm like, well, I'm a podcast host. I'm on YouTube. I can write off my manicures, right? So
Yeah,
that's funny. Well, I read a little bit about you online, and it was mentioned that you grew up pretty conservatively. And, I know many, many women and men in the United States who were raised conservatively, and it really has impacts on their sex life today. So, how did it affect you? Did it affect your sexual health as an adult, and how?
I wish we could do a whole episode just on that question. And thank you to all the content creators who were doing the content creation of like unlearning religion in so many ways. But yes, yes, yes. I don't think there's an aspect of my sexuality that it didn't touch.
Hmm.
Um, Even just as simply as like my understanding of boundaries when I was young was just women saying no to men in bed when they didn't want to have sex with them. That was my only under until like my late 20s. That's what I thought a boundary was. And I didn't ever have the comprehension or the knowledge to say like, oh, actually a boundary could be my partner wants to talk to me about something stressful. And I say, I'm so sorry, I'm stressed out with work. And I need to come down a little first to be able to hear you. Right. That's a boundary too. So that and in a really like vulnerable share, which I believe in being vulnerable, in the way that I was educated, the definition of sex was penis in vagina, and that's it, right? Like that's the only definition. So everything else wasn't sex, which is dangerous actually to say I can do all these other things and I'm still not having sex. I'm still a virgin. God still isn't angry at me. And that is like one of the worst things in sex education. And now my definition of sex is like any meaningful, consensual physical act between two adults, right?
Yeah.
That's what sex is, like for the goal of pleasure. And so, so those ways and um yeah, I just don't I think throughout history and with religion and everything, like I think history and religion really fear women and women feeling good and you know like whatever entity created me, like this is what I would want to say to people in living in conservative environments that don't feel good to them. Whatever thing created my body gave me a clitoris. And I don't believe that that thing gave me a clitoris so that I would have to wait until a man created institution where we both sign a piece of paper, like that should be my barrier to pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that like God is not mad at you, sex is not bad. And there's just so much shame. And so if you are in that environment, just start with like peeling away like what is yours and what was given to you, right? Like
Yeah.
what is really your belief and what was like told to you to believe, and then deal with the shame that might come with that, right? And shame just hijacks sex a lot. I'm going to probably say shame 100 times during our podcast. But take your time and be compassionate. And if you need support, book a session with me, because I love talking about this. And I'm happy to be like for people to find resonance in my story and moving from that.
Well, I think that's the best kind of coach, is one that who says, I've been there, right? And I just want to reflect on a few things that you said. One, I heard you say there's variation in no, right? So women, first of all, like even knowing that you're allowed to say no is a huge step, but actually there's lots of variation in no. There's no, not now. There's no, not, no, never, or actually no, never mind. I changed my mind. Now it's a yes. And like, and what you can say no to, or pause to, or please hold to, right? So I hear variation and no, which is an amazing and hard lesson to learn in a society that tells women that you should say yes, right? And then the other thing you were talking about is, sex being just penis and vagina. Last night I was giving a talk on my book tour, and somebody brought up HPV vaccine and men thinking they don't need it because HPV, well, that's a cervical cancer preventative thing. That's a sexual thing. And yet head, neck, and throat cancer in men predominantly is because of the HPV vaccine. And what we don't want to talk about is that that's from oral sex with women who are infected with HPV. But we don't want to talk about oral sex as a part of sex ed, right? We talk about like, oh, well, if you're trying to have a baby and then maybe STIs might transmit potentially, but it's intercourse based, right? Versus there's lots of variation of sexual wellness that STDs and STIs are transmitted through.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're raised with just like, you haven't had sex until this happens, it takes, like, the reason I said it was dangerous is exactly what you just said, right? Like we could be transmitting things and not even know. Like I remember thinking I could get pregnant in a hot tub, right? And like we weren't even fully touching, like when I was young, and I'm like, could this get me pregnant? Like there's just no education on like it breeds all this extra anxiety, and then we dismiss things that we need to pay attention to,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
speaking of dismissing things that we need to pay attention to, what is somatic coaching? So you've been using this word somatic. There's probably a lot of listeners who've never even heard that word somatic. So what is somatic and what is somatic coaching?
Yeah. So somatic, it means like any kind of physical sensation you have in the body that you can identify, right? So it's the body and its distinction from the mind, but it also embodies mind body connection, right? And so a somatic response might be like, oh, my crush walks into the room and I feel heat and I'm aware of that heat. It also implies awareness, right? Like, oh, I noticed like my cheeks got really red when they walked in and my hands started to shake, right? Great somatic awareness. You're paying attention. And so somatic coaching is using that information to create a lot of freedom in someone's life. And what I mean by that is like, I believe somatic coaching is slowing down the time between stimulus and response. So the stimulus in the example I just gave was my crush just walked in the room. The response was like my face flushed, right? And then maybe I also get thoughts of like unworthiness. And I'm like, oh, they're never going to talk to me and they're never going to like me, right? That's also a response. So what happened inside you between your crush walking in the room and you feeling like you don't deserve them and you're having all of this, right? So in my coaching, somatic very much has to do with the body, but I work with like what thoughts come up in the mind, right? Because they're so related to each other. And we work with slowing down that timing. So it's like, once we can slow down and I can bring awareness to my body, like, okay, I started to learn what my body does. my crush just walked in the room. There's that heat, right? There's that shaking. And I think what comes next is feelings of shame, right? And I can breathe into, why am I feeling shame here, right? Why am I going through all of this? So it's that distancing between that. And did you have another question that I
Well,
didn't?
I'll first reflect that the first time I ever heard of somatic was and I've openly shared this on the show before. It's about 7 years ago. I went inpatient for PTSD treatment, and I
Yeah.
had a somatic therapist, and they asked me, I told them about some memory, and they said, "Well, where do you feel that in your body?" And I
Mhm.
was like, I literally have no idea what that question is even asking me. Like, I don't understand the question. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
But it was the first time that I realized, like, oh, and I had been reading books about like trauma stored in the body. And so it was like, oh, that's what you're asking me, is like, where is it in my body? Right. And sometimes that means like, oh, well, now all of a sudden I notice my shoulders are by my ears. I didn't know that. Or in yoga, I'll notice my tongue is pressed super hard against the roof of my mouth. Why is it pressed so hard on my mouth? Like, and then it was
Mhm.
the yoga instructor says, relax your mouth. And I'm like, oh, wow, my mouth has been so tight. Or
Yeah.
wow, I didn't realize I have a little cramp in my hip, like, but these are pains that we're walking around with all day long, and not even pains, right? I kind of brought pain, but
Often,
sensations of lust or whatever, and being able to tap into that, because and then this is my next question, is how is this beneficial for sexual health? How is the slowing down and asking your body, how do you feel, and then kind of analyzing that, how is that important for sexual health, specifically for females as well?
yeah, yeah. So one of the best examples I think is vaginismus, right? So
And what is
the
that for our listeners who may not
yes,
know?
it's the closing of the vaginal canal, right? So you can't, like, penetration doesn't happen. And it's really hard to feel aroused and connected, right? And
Mm.
so look, I always look at a response like that through a somatic lens. And so I say, okay, why is the body closing, right? What is happening that the body says no, like this is not okay? And so are there medical reasons for vaginismus? Of course, right? But in how we can support someone without medicine, we slow down and we,
Or in addition to,
or in
right? In
addition,
addition to, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, we slow down and we say, why is my body closing? Like, what doesn't
Mm.
feel safe right now?
Mm.
Right? Because vaginismus might have a huge impact on intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Or pelvic pain in other areas. Like, why do I feel pain here? Why, when my partner touches me, do I shrivel? Why
Mm.
do I reject my partner's touch? Right? Why do I not like them touching my breasts at night? Or why do I only like when they touch my breasts at night? Right? It's this awareness of like knowing yourself. And as you know yourself, you can communicate yourself to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so saying like, hey, I get really nervous if someone grabs me from behind and I didn't know that they were there. Right? Some people might find that really charming and fun. And then other people, it can send them somewhere that's really scary. And so in this way, it's important to know how your body works. And so we can explore all of that through like mindfulness techniques, movement, breath work, visualization, self-touch. If you're in a session with a somatic practitioner, they might offer to incorporate touch, but in a way that's very supportive. I do in person sessions, I offer touch to my clients, but it's very boundaried touch in service of their expansion and wellness.
Yeah. When I think of touch and somatic experience, it's like I had a personal trainer one year, and sometimes just the placement of just her index finger on what muscle in my back was supposed to be the one working, it provided the mind body connection by feeling her finger. I was like, oh, that's where I'm supposed to be feeling, because maybe I've never thought about that deltoid before, never tried to feel it before. And so that touch can be incorporated that way. Well, what are some of the biggest sexual health challenges you're seeing your clients and females facing today?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in cis females, right, which is I assume primarily what we're talking about, because we're talking about, the reproductive system. A lot of it, well, I should just say anyone socialized as a woman,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the stuff that I support is just this like shame and heteronormative standard that we all have to meet. Of it's like, am I taking too long to have an orgasm? Am I asking too much? I don't want to have sex with my partner today. Is that wrong? Oh my goodness. Like, what does that mean? And I find like, if we speak in kind of gender binary, a lot of cis men have spontaneous arousal, which is the mention of sex and I'm ready to go, essentially, to boil it down, right? And a lot of cis women have responsive arousal, which means I need more. I might need touch. I might need you to tell me you love me. I might need flowers. I might need a hot bath. I might need to use my vibrator before I let you touch me, you know? And so I think even just like the guilt and the shame that we're not meeting this like movie standard of sex is like so just everywhere in my practice.
Yeah. That's why Dr. Lindsay Harper's app, Rosie, featured in the chapter of sexual health in Unlocking Women's Health, my book. That's what her whole app is about. Her whole app is about the mental arousal that gets you to be able to have a healthy sex life. That's what you're referring to, I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I listened to your episode with her earlier today, and she was talking how she has the erotica on there so people can go in and read it and start to get their brain in that moment. But you know, we hold like we have to be horny in this amount of time, we have to have an orgasm in this amount of time, so and so has to finish first, so and so should take this long, and that just causes a lot of internal distress, right? It just causes a lot of like shutdown. So that's one of the biggest things. And also pelvic pain during sex and feeling like, oh, am I useless because I can't receive penetration in the way that I want to, right? Is my sex life just shot? And something that like is really near and dear to my heart, that I feel personally is I'm an endometriosis warrior. And endo is something that impacts, you know, sexual health, because we can't talk about sexual health without reproductive health, right? And all of the stuff that happens inside a cis female's pelvis. And endometriosis is impacting intimacy. And it's like, it causes pelvic pain. It's like, I can only do this, I can only do that. And so, yeah, I want to see more support of people with endo and pelvic pain, because the time in between symptom onset into diagnosis is 9.6 years. For me, it was 13, you know, and it was 13 years.
You know, people forget that the average is an average. It means in the middle. That means
right?
like 50% of people are more than that.
Yeah. I started having symptoms and in my early 20s, and I wasn't diagnosed until last year. And I went to people over and over and over. And like, there were x-ray, you know, like no one caught it. And so had I known so much earlier, how would things be different now? So I want to see way more support for people with endo.
Totally. Are there new solutions that you're excited about addressing these challenges you're seeing?
Yeah, actually, someone in your network in the Slack channel created an app called Endo 45. And I had a great chat with her, and I'm in the app, and she started to offer me some solutions that I can do in my diet. And I already feel like worlds better. So yes.
Oh my gosh.
Woohoo! Her name's Juliet. She's amazing. And yeah, like there are things, and there's all these amazing women and people just in general in the industry that are like, no more, like we're changing this.
Yeah. Well, you were recently featured in Hustler. Go you for having been an entrepreneur who started in the pandemic to also, you know, already be featured in Hustler. Obviously, you are talking about the topics that are relevant and mainstream and critical, and you're talking about them in a way that people want to hear more from you. So go, first of all, just let me like praise you. Like, hell yeah, that's such a cool PR opportunity. So I read the article in Hustler, and you described the nervous system health and secure attachment. I'd love for you to tell our listeners, what are those things? What is nervous system health and what is secure attachment? What are those?
Yeah. So in the way I hold them in my practice, so nervous system health is knowing kind of what we were talking about before, like what are my responses, right? I used to live in New York City, and I was always on edge, right? I was always hypervigilant. I was always looking around the corner. That's not healthy for my nervous system, right? That's
Yeah.
putting my nervous system in an environment where it's always activated. And so that, like, knowing what are activations, knowing what are regulators, knowing what can make us like go into our rest and digest, and
Mhm.
take us out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of those things is really important to sexual health. Because if I come home, when I live in New York, and I got off the subway and my body is shaking and I'm so stressed out and I don't have the awareness of why that is, and I go to try to have sex with my partner, who knows what's going to happen? It's not very connective, right? It's not a very connective experience. But knowing, okay, I can come down, this supports me, this supports me. So that's how
Yeah.
I like to describe it.
Yeah.
And
I have one example of noticing my nervous system was when I first moved away for graduate school and moved from New Jersey to Houston and kind of built my own little life with my boyfriend there. And it was 6 months in, we came back to New Jersey to my mom's home, my childhood home for Christmas. Within the first hour, I was in the bathroom calling my best friend in Houston, being like, I don't know what's wrong, but like I'm kind of freaking out. And she was like, well, like your nervous system is responding to being home. And I was like, oh my gosh, because, my mom, she has ADD. So there's a lot of just like kind of clustering in the house. There's a lot of papers everywhere and things and not in like a terrible bad way, but just kind of like where how I set up my home was like really soft and peaceful and clean and so like going back there, I mentally was like, I don't know why I feel like that, but my body was like, ah, right? And so that's what I'm hearing you say. And I didn't know what that was. Now, when I go home, I kind of prep. I say to myself, okay, we're still safe. We're safe, even though we feel this way. And this is temporary, right? Like, but I just wanted to give it another example of maybe people can relate to that.
yeah, totally. So anytime you're feeling like your body do something in response to something else, pay attention, right? Your body's like throwing you information. And we tend to like, we kind of tapped on it a little bit before, but like we tend to only exist from the head up. And we don't really, like, when your somatic therapist asks you, where do you feel that in your body? A lot of us don't know how to answer that, right? So if your body does something and you're noticing a pattern, like, let's listen to it.
Yep.
And the other, go ahead.
Yep. Please tell me you were right on it. What's secure
I was going to
attachment?
answer secure attachment. So your attachment style is just kind of like, how safe do you feel in relationships?
Hmm.
Like, how comfortable is being in intimacy for you? And so we see a lot online now of like, what's your attachment style? What's this? What's that? And I did a training at the Embody Lab, which I love. Shout out to the Embody Lab. And they use instead, or at least in this training, attachment strategy, which I liked so much more because that's what it is, right? Like, if I have an insecure attachment style and my partner doesn't answer my text right away, and I just send them a barrage of text messages to try to get them to answer me. That's a strategy to make sure the connection is still there.
Mm.
Right. And what a less shaming word than this is my style and it's going to last forever because we can update it. So I prefer the word strategy so much more because style just feels like it's forever, and I look at it as like, what operating system did we download when we were kids about how to be in relationship? And that's our operating system until we update it, but we can update it. So that's the good news.
Thank goodness. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. Everything can be updated.
Mhm.
Um, how does that relate to sexual health in terms of the nervous system and attachment style? Some may already be connecting the dots, but let's just connect it for everybody. What's the connection between sexual health and attachment style and or not style, what did you just say? Strategy, attachment
Strategy.
strategy and nervous system.
Yeah. So kind of like what we were talking about before, in terms of like vaginismus might happen, my body might shut down during sex. So how safe I feel being in intimacy is going to be a huge indicator of my quality of sex life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And today's like medicine, Western medicine may not be considering attachment style when they're prescribing medications for, female sexual dysfunction or pelvic floor, spasms. They may not be asking these questions to their female patients. Like, by the way, what's your attachment strategy? Do you feel safe? What's your nervous system telling you? Instead, they're Western medicine trained. So they're going to say, okay, well, here's a physical therapy to do, and here's a drug to take. Here's a pamphlet to read. But what I'm hearing is that you're offering this kind of new version of sexual health that is asking some other deeper questions.
Yeah, because it puts the power back in the hands of whoever's experiencing it, right? So if my nervous system shuts down whenever I go into a bedroom, that's probably something that I can support. And if I slow down and do the work to figure out why, that's going to open up so much more connection with my partner, right? If I go, okay, every time I walk in there, I feel like I can't be with you. And now I know why. And I tell my partner and it's received lovingly. Oh my gosh, you're going to have a great time, I hope, in your bedroom that night. And so that is, it's directly correlated. And then nervous system, your attachment strategy and your nervous system interact very closely, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm insecure, I might have an activated nervous system. And so an
Mm-hmm.
indicator of your attachment style is like, how regulated do I feel around my partner?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do I feel safe around my partner? Do I feel like I can be at ease? And sometimes the answer to that question might not be your partner's fault, right? If I'm
Yeah.
activated around my partner, this might be old stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's up to you to really listen in and say, is this old stuff or are they hitting on some stuff? Or are they creating new stuff? Is what
New
I mean.
stuff, new stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well,
Yeah.
we're all about innovating solutions here. And so, do you think that sex tech products could help women's nervous system? And if you had a magic wand to create a product that you think would help, what would it be?
Yeah. And so we're both wearing our Crave.
Yes.
And I want to say that I have actually worn this and turned it on vibrate and put it on my chest. And it is so soothing to my nervous system.
Oh,
I feel
wow.
like I drop in and I just feel so regulated. But this is like a nervous system regulation hotspot for me, like right like in between my breasts on like my rib cage.
Yeah.
It's like putting my Crave vibrator there is like really, really
Wow. And for those who are just listening, maybe you're driving or on a run or walking the dogs, doing the dishes. Crave is an amazing sex tech company that's featured in Unlocking Women's Health, where T. Chang, she's an incredible designer. She created essentially sexual wellness jewelry. So it's jewelry. And so we're wearing these really beautiful necklaces, but they also have functionality like vibrating. And I love that idea that it doesn't necessarily have to be vibrating on the genitals, that you could actually use this on different points on your body that's regulating your nervous system, which may have an effect in 6 hours later when you actually engage in sexual wellness, right? But in the year, it's a full day, it's a full body, it's a full life experience.
Yeah. And I think like there's a lot of products that we have that I have one of my favorites right here actually that just are meant to create sensation, right? So this is the Dea, it's like a feather, it's a vibrating tickler. And Dea is spelled DEIA for the people just listening. But this is only to like create gentle sensation up and down the body. And
Mm.
it doesn't really work for my body, at least as like a vibrator, but it does work in just kind of like bringing me into regulation, bringing me into my body. And so getting creative with like your sex toys and getting your body into a warm, juicy, open state is awesome. And I forget if there was another part of that question. I get so excited to talk about it.
We're getting distracted by holding up all these awesome products.
I know I have all my sex toys around me during this call. So yeah.
Well, I think that brings up a great point because male sexual dysfunction is typically addressed by a physician and getting prescribed medication, and females are often told to go to a therapist to talk about it. And you're holding up all these products that probably weren't prescribed to you by a physician. You didn't pick it up at CVS. These products that we're wearing or holding up. So, what's the appropriate pathway then for healing the sexes and specifically females? Should there be a different mindset or protocol around how we treat female sexual dysfunction?
Yeah. So I don't believe in only clinicalizing anything to do with sex, right?
Mhm.
And like, sending people with penises to an MD and sending people with vulvas to a therapist feels very clinical to me. It
Mm.
depends on the practitioner, right? Of course. But there's already creating shame, and even in the word dysfunction, right? There's already, hey, something is not functioning normally. And
Yeah.
so I always like to challenge words like that. I know we use them as a framework to understand a set of symptoms, but I like to say like dysfunctioning because of what, right? So is vaginismus a dysfunction? If the body is trying to protect the person from more pain, I think it's a really well functioning body, actually.
Yeah, yeah, loving your responses, loving them for what they've provided you because they may have showed up for a protective meaning.
Yeah. So
Mm.
your body is so intelligent, like it is so intelligent and it does everything it can to keep you alive and safe. It's your body's job to keep you happy. It's your body's job to keep you alive. And so
Oh, that's so good.
yeah, so if
Yeah.
having sex is going to threaten your aliveness, your body is going to do stuff to make you listen, right? And
Interesting.
then our job to update the body and say, I hear you. That experience was really painful. Are you open to healing and
Mm,
realizing that this moment isn't that moment anymore? But you did a really smart thing in that moment, protecting me, right? And I
wow.
believe that even for erectile dysfunction, like, what is
Mm.
your penis not wanting to get hard for? Why isn't it wanting to get hard? Right? There might be, are you fighting with your partner a lot? Do you feel unheard? Is your boss like cutting you down every time you walk in the room and now it's shaking your sense of self? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what is your body trying to show you that is happening for you? And that's when you
Wow.
sit down and you listen and all of that.
Well, it sounds like a scientific experiment with yourself where you are the subject matter and you're asking research questions. And something I'm really excited about as a nerdy PhD scientist is the research we're now starting to do in female sexual wellness. I was actually listening to a podcast about the witch wound, which was about pain in women from historical persecution of witches, which essentially witches were women in community who talked about herbs and science, and they cast them out as being these evil subsets of society and killed them. And so there was all of a sudden this reform on how women should behave. Anyways, long story short, I found part of the episode super fascinating that they said that they would, these men would review the bodies of these witches after they were killed, after they were murdered, and they found what they called the devil's nipple. And turns out that it was the clitoris. It was the clitoris, and based on how large the clitoris was, they would document how large the devil's nipple was and say like that's how evil she was, right? And so that's not that long ago, y'all. That is not that long ago. And that is like they were writing medical records about the devil's nipple. So anyways, I'm so glad we are in today where we have products like, and for those just listening, I'll kind of describe this. We have Crescendo, which is might come off looking like a sex toy, but is actually medically approved for pelvic floor therapy to actually strengthen and loosen the muscles in the pelvic floor. And so, reading Unlocking Women's Health, you'll see why the CEO took a more medical device route versus just a sex toy route, consumer packaged goods. And then you also have Lioness, which is the first ever vibrator that is measuring and monitoring and recording orgasms. And they're working with Kinsey Institute, which is, if you've ever heard the Kinsey scale of sexuality, came out of Indiana University's Kinsey Institute, an amazing research facility that studies human sexuality and sexual function. And they're using this data for the first time ever to say, how long is a female orgasm? How many do they have? If you are smoking weed, does it take you longer? Or if you are drinking alcohol, or if you are this age, or if you're postmenopause, or if you're fertile, like so many good, juicy research questions being asked and researched. If you, again, seeing all of this, do you have any research topics that you would like to see pursued?
Uh, Definitely endometriosis.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Still lots of endo research, please. And I would like to see more research done around fertility in women over 35 because we just have such a like, I don't know, you're old now, you're geriatric for pregnancy, all of this stuff when it is actually really possible to conceive and have a healthy baby. And so, you know, I would love to see kind of everything around that happen. And then something I also want to see, way more of are toys for people with penises that aren't just like a fleshlight, because it, in bringing it back to endometriosis, so people with endometriosis, myself included, we have pelvic pain. And sometimes that can cause us not to want to experience penetration, right? Because it's not enjoyable. And that's just what happens when you have endo. And so something like, there's one of my favorite toys between me and my partner is called the Arc Wave. It's a stroker, and it provides connection for he and I when we want to experience penetration. So you just use the stroker, you just grab it and you just put it between your legs, and you just simulate as if you are experiencing penetrative sex. And it creates so much connection and freedom, and it takes pressure off of my body to have to feel okay during penetration. So I want to see more connective toys, right? More toys that it's like, okay, your partner is experiencing pain. That doesn't have to mean you guys don't have sex tonight, right? What other choices can we create there? Because that option has been so freeing for me to feel, I didn't ruin it, right? Which is my own stuff that I also try to hold and love on, and like, you didn't ruin anything, girl, you know, but
Yeah. What I hear you describing is kind of like accessible sex tech. So, for the first time ever, we're having sex toys that maybe you don't have, and I don't know the right terminology, it's not my specialty, but people who struggle with mobility, especially in their fingers or their hands or their wrists or their arms, a lot of toys are requiring you to bend over certain ways and twist your arm certain ways and hold it still for this long. And so, like, how can we make, hardware that is accessible to everybody of every ability, every physical ability, and that includes endometriosis, right? Not just the physical outward appearance of your physical ability, but also internally, and what's your internal physical ability to receive, to give, etc. It's what I'm hearing you talk about.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Please, all the researchers, make an endo-friendly sex toy.
Cool. Next $1 billion idea, because it's
Yeah.
not niche. Well, we are almost at time, but I can't help myself but ask you, you're currently now living in France. Do you find, marketing around female sexual pleasure more accessible there? How is culture affecting your view coming from New York City, which one might say New York City, that's super liberal, like, like that's all in the street, it's not like it's a conservative Arkansas city or New York City. But how are you seeing the difference in Bordeaux, south of France, in terms of appreciation, talking, marketing of sexual wellness compared to the United States?
Yeah, Bordeaux's an interesting city when it comes to that, because there's a lot of young people here. There's also a lot of kind of an older generation. I don't know. I don't come into contact with sex that often here.
Mm.
I there are a few sex shops here in Bordeaux, and that's great. I think one of the biggest things I've come into contact is how shocked people are that with how comfortable I am talking about sex. I think they're just like, whoa. And France is a very sex positive country,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
very like, it's okay and all of that, but it's been an interesting feedback. And also, France is currently doing an overhaul of their sex ed programs in primary schools, teaching boundaries, consent, biological sex, gender identity, all of that stuff. So, in comparison to the US, like, I didn't ever become aware of that happening anywhere in the US. And New York is super liberal, super sex positive, like very kinky, like there's access to everything in New York, right? And so it's kind of its own thing. But teaching kids that young, yes, no, this is what gender is, all of that stuff is going to shape the entire thing. Because like like you said in your book, like the stigma keeps people from seeking help. Like we can't even sometimes even say the word sex without blushing. And so how am I going to go get help for it if I can't even describe what's happening to me? But if we're teaching people at a young age, like their anatomy and what a no means and what a yes means and all of that, like it's going to shift everything, right? For
That's so
everyone.
cool. Well,
Yeah.
I was actually a foreign exchange student in high school. I don't know if you knew this. So I lived in Fontainebleau, which is a city just south of Paris, for a year,
I've
my
been
senior
there.
year, senior year of high school. And I lived with a French family, and they had a 9-year-old boy. I was 17 at the time. And there was a little book, a little sex ed book for him in the bathroom. And sometimes I would read it, and I was like, oh my God, these are like kid cartoons of naked people having sex. But it was mostly like basic biology of the body. And so, but I found that to be, I was like translating words, right? Like in my little dictionary, like, oh, what is that? But it's really cool to hear that, what is it, 13 years, 14 years later, that it's now also including things like the boundaries and gender. And so America still needs to get up to date with what I experienced 15 years ago. We first need to get there, but it's exciting to see that there's also future education that we can do. Crystal, this has been such an amazing conversation. You are a rock star. You are offering something to our listeners, something very special. What is that?
Yeah. So if you contact me and you say femtech, right, because you listened to the podcast, I will offer you 10% off of your first coaching package or 10% off your first 3 sessions with me. So come get somatic sexology coaching and let's dive into all this stuff.
Oh, wow. What an offer, y'all. I've been to her masterclass. I've done a one-on-one. I can highly recommend her. And then you've heard her experience today. So thank you for being a healer in our community.
Yeah.
I know when we did a little pre-interview, you were like, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an MD. I'm not a hardware developer. But yet I think that we need to, when we think about women's health, we also need to question, how has medicine been done as it always has? How can medicine be done differently that benefits women the best? And I think that things like somatic coaching are 100% up there. So that's why I invited you, because I think that this is one of the key pillars to us healing our sexual health. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there's one thing I can just leave people with, it's just like notice where shame is hijacking your life, right? And just be brave enough to sit with it. And like, that's something that medicine doesn't really do, right? It doesn't really say, are you feeling shame? And is that why all this stuff is cut off? So, yeah, if that's what I can
Beautiful. And then
people,
I was like, and then when something comes up, you message Crystal and say
yeah.
femtech. Beautiful. All right. Thanks, Crystal. Bye.
Bye.